Well, ever since we found out that Batman was coming back in Cape Crusader and it was going to be brought to us by Bruce Timm, there was a high level of anticipation for the series. Now, the whole thing has dropped on Amazon Prime, and we've had a chance to watch the whole thing, so we thought we'd take a couple minutes to dive into it, talk a little bit about what we thought, what's going on, and how great of an expansion of the Batman mythos this show is, and if it lives up to its predecessor, Batman the Animated Series. Now, right out of the gate, I have to say, I'm a Batman fan, and I did enjoy this series. There are a couple of changes we're going to talk about along the way, and although some of them might be, well, a bit divisive, almost all of them worked well on screen. Now, as far as Batman goes, though, there's very, very little new about the character, but given the fact that Batman has about a 100-year history, well, there's already a lot to pull from. Almost all the core elements still exist. Bruce Wayne is a billionaire playboy. He becomes a vigilante to fight Gotham's villains in the memory after the murder of his parents. And this is done with a focus on things like gadgets. The grapple gun actually exists in the show. He's got the Batmobile, and there's even a submarine. So all the classic elements are there for the Batman. Now, this interpretation of Gotham, though, is a bit, wide-ranging. There are some very colorful takes on the city, as well as the dark, the chaotic, and even the monochromatic, giving this version of Gotham, quite the different look, and a little bit of a taste of how any city will vary from location to location. Now, the series was developed, like we said, the series was developed by Bruce Timm, who was one of the co-creators of Batman the Animated Series, and it definitely serves as somewhat of a reboot of the 90s series. Now, throughout the series, you see the inspiration of the Fleischer Studios' classic Superman cartoon, the Art Deco architecture, the solid colors, and the timeless period setting. Heck, there's even a couple cameos if you pay close attention, and many people think they not only spotted Lois Lane, but Jimmy Olsen amongst the reporters in several scenes in the series. The show definitely feels like an echo of that original Batman animated series, but it's just somewhat adjusted to serve this specific story. The story is a noir blend of old school elements and progressive ideas, and you especially see this in the casting, and it really does revisit the past without a nostalgic lens, which quite honestly was refreshing because that often limits how some reboots work, kind of confining them to their original series. Now, as far as Batman goes, I actually really like this version of the Bat. Now, throughout history, we've gotten different versions of Batman, from goofy to very serious to kind of, sort of kiddie. And in this series, we definitely get a more serious take on Batman. We're going to give full credit to Hamish Linklater for kind of doing the impossible. He definitely invoked Kevin Conroy throughout the series, and just like we heard, his Bruce Wayne was definitely definitively different, which was something Conroy did so well and definitely continued in this series. Overall, Linklater did a great job filling a role that was going to be really difficult, and he truly deserves a hats off or a cows off for this one. Now, his costume has some subtle changes, but nothing really extreme. There's no yellow backdrop on the symbol. A solid black cape with a muted yellow belt completely works. He definitely has extended ears, and that works pretty well with a really broad-shouldered interpretation of the character, and of course the short, bunchy gloves. Now, we wouldn't have a Batman series without villains, and honestly, this is where we see a lot of changes. Now, throughout the series, we get several well-known villains, including the Penguin, who was gender-flipped and voiced by Minnie Driver, a new version of Harley Quinn, which quite honestly I liked, Selena Kyle returns as Catwoman, and we watch Harvey Dent become Two-Face. Now, along with them, we get a couple of other villains that really haven't been brought to life in animation before, and they're done pretty well, this including Onomatopoeia, Firebug, and of course, Gentleman Ghost, who quite honestly was one of my favorite villains of the year. Now, along with Nocturna, Gentleman Ghost kind of gave the show, some supernatural elements that definitely was lacking in previous versions of the Batman, and then setting the show in the 30s and 40s, paying homage to these classic Bat stories while bringing in these supernatural elements definitely made it feel more mysterious. One of the biggest changes to the villains in the show had to be Harvey Dent. Now, lots of people had aesthetic or maybe even racial changes to the character, but this version of Harvey was definitely different. Traditionally, Harvey becomes a villain when he's deformed, but in this show, Harvey Dent becomes Two-Faced before he becomes Two-Face. His moral corruption leads to his physical disfigurement, where before it was his pursuit of justice, and it definitely makes him for quite the different take on the classic version of the Harvey Dent Two-Face character. It was actually, for me, the hardest one to sort of deal with. Harvey's supposed to be a good guy, and this version of Harvey from episode 1 never really was, so when he did finally fall to his own villainy, it didn't seem like such a tragedy. Now, one of the villains many people haven't mentioned, though, is the city itself, because the city of Gotham is basically one of the villains in the series. This is a completely corrupt version of Gotham that's completely overrun by the mob, bought-off policemen, and politicians totally entangled in criminal activities. This gives Batman a little bit of a bigger base of opposition than we normally see, and although throughout the first season we see him bond with the Gordons, well, there are plenty of enemies that are not traditional Batman villains that get in the way of the pursuit of justice, and this version of Batman definitely has to deal with more than we're pretty used to. Now, as far as the animation on the show, I really did like what they gave us. It really did reinforce that noir look that we were really expecting. Now, I'm going to be honest though, there were a couple of moments you could tell they were, well, cheapening the animation. Actually, this past season of Invincible gave a great tease to how this is done, with suppositional dialogue and very slow-moving shots, and we definitely saw quite a bit of that in the show. Now, along with the visuals, there's always sound and music, and I actually think this is where the show definitely excelled. From the rumble of the Batmobile to the new music taking up this series, it all completely worked. Quite honestly, coming up with a new cartoon theme song for this version of Batman, well, was pretty dangerous, and you have to give credit where credit is due because this one definitely works. Now, for this show, I definitely think it'll hit all the beats for Batman fans of various stages. It's very likely to satisfy casual fans because it is light and each episode stands on its own. It will appeal to die-hard fans because we get some deep dives into Batman mythos and villains we've never seen brought to life in animation, and hopefully it introduces a whole new generation of Batman fans to the character, the mythos, and the world of Gotham City. Now, overall, I'm going to give this series an 8.5 out of 10. I had a ball watching it. I'm actually going through and watching it a second time, picking up new nuance and details. And honestly, guys, I can't wait for Season 2 to see where they take this. My only request next time is to maybe serialize the episodes a little more, or maybe some two-parters to expand some of these stories. Some of them did feel a little rushed, but they are half-hour animated episodes, so you can only do so much. What did you guys think? Did you like the new Batman, Crusader? And what do you want to see out of Season 2?